Hello, Palladium fans. I'm here with Kevin, and today we're continuing our history of Palladium books, and we're coming to one of my favorites that turned me on to a lot of paranormal uh, options and ideas, and like spawned a ton of new interests in my life beyond the supernatural. Kevin, thanks for joining me again.
Happy to be talking about this.
All right, so let's talk beyond the supernatural. Where did it come from? Yeah, the cover is iconic. Do you want to start with the cover, or do you want to start with the history?
We can go with the cover.
Let's do it.
So this beautiful cover is by strangely enough, an artist that a lot of modern people don't seem to know about. He was huge in the 70s and 80s and even into the 90s. He did a lot of work for Heavy Metal magazine. He was a major focus in the original 1981 Heavy Metal movie with Den. Mm-hmm. He started out doing a lot of independent black and white, and then later color, adult, more Metal Hurlant style or types of adult themed comic books with lots of naked people. And one of the things he was famous for, and women, please don't be upset, this is just the way it was, was, very beautifully super built men and women. And the women had gigantic watermelon, looked like missile breasts. And so but the stories were great. The art was amazing. A lot of his color work, again, this goes back to olden technology, but there were color separations in the original before everything went digital. Yeah. And Corbin had such an eye for color and such a mind for precision, is that a lot of the things he created before he got into painting was actually, he would cut out physically hand cut all the different layers for the colors. Yeah. Wow. And they looked, and he would airbrush it. He did a lot of airbrushing. He was a master of airbrush. He'd airbrush a lot of that, and it looked beautiful. You'd see these pages, and you'd go, wow, these are beautiful airbrush paintings. And a lot of them, some were, but a lot of them were just, this is the color, this is the yellow color layer, this is the blue color layer, this is the red color layer.
Right, that's why we call them 4-color comics, because they were...
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So imagine him basically doing these grayscales for each grayscale paintings that we know today for each color layer. The guy was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And by the time I hired him to do this beautiful cover, mm-hmm. He was doing actual paintings, and in fact, it's a mixed medium painting. The background and some of the sand and the rocks, that's acrylic.
Okay.
And a bunch of it is airbrush, and then the actual figures and other elements of the painting are oil.
Oh, wow.
So it was very interesting. And again, this is back in the day, much like when I was talking about ninjas and super spies and Mystic China. This is back in the day where the artist would send you the frickin' original painting, which always scared me, traveling through the mail. But
right.
And this painting arrives, and it's magnificent, and it's perfect. But before that, so before he does the painting, because of his reputation for drawing well-endowed women, I felt really awkward because I'm having this conversation with Rich, and I'm like, so yeah, Rich, you like drawing these well-endowed women and stuff, but this is like a PG-13 or soft R kind of product, and we try to hit a wide audience. I need you to draw like real proportion to women if you're going to put them on the cover. And he's like, no problem. So, but I'm scared. I don't know what I'm going to get. Although we did get some color samples first. Typically, artists, even to this day, will do 2 to 4 cover concepts. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they're just black and white pencils or ink, and other times they're full color. whether they're watercolor or some quick wash or something, or marker even. And so we picked this cover. It comes back in, and it's gorgeous. The female character looks great. She's beautifully proportioned. And I asked Richard, "Oh my gosh, this is magnificent! Can I buy it?" And I ranted and raved about it. And I'm like, "Can I buy the original?" And he's like, "Sure." And I'm like, "So what do you get these days?" He goes, "Well, you got to talk to my agent." So he gives me his number. I call up the agent, and the agent's like, "Well, Richard gets $3,000 to $5,000 for a painting nowadays." And I'm like, "Oh, I can't afford that. At least not yet."
Yeah.
And
I'm not saying it's not worth it. Just
no, it's super worth it, but
yeah.
it was out of my price range. So I call up Richard. I tell him thanks, but I can't afford it. And he goes, "Well, how much can you afford?" And I go, I don't know, Richard. I mean, $1,200-$1,500. He goes, "Sold." And I'm like, "What? Really?" He's like, "Yeah, I'll call up my agent and let him know." So I call up the agent, and I'm like, "Yeah, so I'm going to buy that painting." And he's okay. That'll be $2,500. And I'm like, $2,500.
Yeah.
Richard said, I don't care what Richard said. This is what he gets. This is what you got. So I call up Richard, not to, tell on his
Right.
agent, but just to say, "Richard, again, thank you, but I understand,
This is what you get.
And he's like, "What did he say?" "I will call him. I will take care of this." So we this goes back and forth like 3 or 4 times until finally he's like, "I'm sending you the painting today. It's $1,200. Send me a check." And 2 days later, the painting shows up that I sent them the check, and the agent was not happy with us.
Yeah, I can imagine that because, right, agents got to make their money too, and this sort of bypassed that whole process.
Right. But then so Richard Corbin was a really cool guy, and although we didn't really talk a lot, I think there was a kind of large age difference. I want to say he was like 10 or 12 years older than me, and we'd have nice conversations, but they weren't like the kind that you and I have. Yeah. And we weren't, I wouldn't say we were buddies. It was just, he did this job for me, and he was very nice and listened to what we wanted and delivered 100%. So after I get this painting, out of the blue, I get a manila envelope. It's from Richard. And I'm thinking, what the heck could this be? I already got the contracts back from him. And I open it up. There's no letter, no nothing. And inside is the 2 watercolor concept pieces that he did for the cover. That's obviously the cover we used. And you can see how it's amazing how similar it is. I mean, it really stuck with a lot of the same elements. It's really very close. And then one of the other ones he had done, he sent me that one too, which is this was one of his ideas, alternate ideas.
Yeah.
And I went with the one that was more obviously supernatural. And dynamic.
Because it's beyond the supernatural, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that other one reminded me a little bit too much of like Indiana Jones. And so I call Richard up, and I'm like, "Richard, this stuff came in the mail, and I could barely afford that painting. I can't afford to buy the watercolor concepts too."
Yeah.
And he goes like, "Oh no, you love the painting so much. I want you to have these."
That's awesome.
I mean, what a nice guy.
Yeah.
He didn't have to do that. He could have got hundreds of dollars for each of those, maybe 1,000. I don't know.
Yeah.
How nice.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just, awesome. Great guy. And then, so the other, speaking while we're on the subject of art.
Right, because the interior artist
was Kevin Long, and for the monsters, Master of Horror, Stephen Bissett.
Yes, who went on to do Swamp Thing.
Well, he was already doing Swamp Thing. He was like the hot Swamp Thing artist.
So how did you get Richard and Stephen to do a Palladium book?
Well, much like Sterenko, I had good old Alex Marcinison, who's a master of research, find their phone number. I don't know how he does it, and or did it back then, especially without computers and stuff. And he tracked them down, and I called them up, explained what we were doing. I think for me, a lot of it had to do with being a fellow artist, and really appreciating their work. And they could tell that I was genuine about it.
Oh yeah, it goes a long way.
And and I didn't try to, get them to not do the work for peanuts.
Right.
I would ask them what they're getting. Like, if I recall correctly, I think we paid $2,000 or $3,000 for that to be able to do this cover.
Yeah.
And same thing with Stephen Bissett. We talked terms, and I said great, and he said fantastic. And then Stephen and I are much closer in age, might even be the same age, and so we just kind of hit it off. And I think I'm a very good art director. I think one of the things that a lot of people miss is just treating these guys with the respect they deserve.
Yeah.
And treating them fairly, paying them fairly. It goes so long. And then I don't art direct the heck out of them. Like, I gave Richard an idea of what the book was and what I kind of wanted. And he sent me those 2 pieces. I said, great, go with this first one. He did. It's beautiful.
It is.
And they appreciate that. They appreciate not being, oh, how about, gee, Rich, this looks great, but could you maybe make that costume a little purple? And I don't know about a blonde. Why don't you make her a redhead? I don't do shit like that.
Right.
I give them as much freedom as I can. Now, if they're getting something wrong,
you gotta course correct.
Right. Especially if it's like, they're depicting something that's really well known. Say like a glitter boy. It's got to look like a glitter boy. It's got to have all the right components in the right places.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, we have to go back over and over and over. And it's, reflective chrome. So it's got to be that. Like, and I use that as an example because we've had a number of problems over the years with people trying to portray glitter boys. And I usually have to art direct the heck out of them. And I don't like it, but, it needs to look like a freaking glitter boy.
Right.
But whenever I can give artists a ton of freedom, I do. And that's what I did with Bissett. I said, I need different types of creatures and this and that. And in some cases, I said, give me a werewolf thing or this or that. And I said, why don't you just give me like 6 or 8 or 10, depending how inspired you are. Just wild creatures. And I'll figure out what they are and create stats for them and a background for them. And that's what he did, and they're just incredible. I mean, it's Stephen Bissett.
I know. All right, so we've got the art stories, but how did this game? Because up until this point, right, Palladium has really been mostly science fiction. We had the Palladium fantasy game, but mostly science fiction. Bent, and this is very much a more of a modern, grounded sort of paranormal game.
Well, I've always been fascinated with the paranormal. UFOs, Bigfoot, Nessie, psychic abilities. That's pretty obvious. I got psychic abilities in almost every single game setting that we do. It's one of the first game mechanics that I figured out way back when. And so I was always fascinated by it, and I thought it'd be fun to do sort of a modern horror game. Call of Cthulhu had come out a few years, maybe even several years earlier, and people loved it. And I'm a Lovecraft fan too, and I didn't want to do Cthulhu. I wanted something that was more Kolchak the Night Stalker. For those ancient people like myself who remember shows from the 60s and 70s. For more modern audiences, something more like the X-Files or the Supernatural TV show. So I wanted to tell those kind of stories and focus more on the demonic and good versus evil and psychic abilities and magic and all that stuff. Again, like you, JM, I'm into history, so I found the Spanish Inquisition fascinating. I read lots of books on it.
Yeah.
And saw lots of movies. I was a big horror fan. Movie that had a lot to do with it too. There was a great TV show called One Step Beyond that was from the 60s, and every episode was supposedly a real world event that they were kind of like recreating in a story format. And I found those, just as a kid, I was just freaking fascinated. They gave me nightmares like every episode. My mom and dad were like, "I don't think you should watch this, Kevin." I'm like, I can do it.
I can do it.
And then I'd have nightmares for a week, and they're like, oh. But that was a great show. I was into the Twilight Zone and Outer Limits and Ripley's Believe It or Not. And then, like I said, books, Ivan T. Sanderson's book on, Bigfoot and the Abominable Snowman and that kind of thing. And so cryptids and all that stuff was just very fascinating to me. And then I think my horror background, when I was younger, there were a lot of great movies coming out of England in particular. And but in the late 60s and early 70s, Alex and I are going to a bunch of comic book conventions and stuff. And they always had, one of the big appeals at the time was film at night, where you show cult classic movies, like Freaks and Night of the Living Dead. I mean, I got to meet George Romero at one of those, like a 1970 or 71 Detroit Triple Fanfare. And he was one of my inspirations, by the way, to start Palladium, because during his talk, he explains how, well, it's a super low budget movie, and I just had this great idea, and the whole town kind of worked with me, and they worked for free or very cheaply. And, those guts you see people eating are actually, pig entrails have been cooked or whatever, and all this stuff. And then you hear all those low budget secrets, and I'm like, wow, this guy's amazing. If he can do it. And he was from Pennsylvania. I have relatives in Pennsylvania. I'm like, if he can do this,
I can do something like that.
Exactly. And so, the old Hammer films, Dracula, and all kinds of great stuff were all part of that inspiration. Plus a bunch of American stuff as well. People kind of laugh at it or when they think about it, but if you really watch Dracula and the first Frankenstein movie, they're really pretty well done, especially Dracula. It's a pretty serious, and it holds up. I mean, it's black and white, but I mean, it's serious, interesting, kind of spooky stuff. So I always had a love. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's like Jason and the Argonauts, right? It still looks great because of the way they did it.
Yeah, right. Don't get me started on Ray Harryhausen or Jason and the Argonauts. I mean, I had seen a couple of his, I think, a couple of Harryhausen's Sinbad movies.
Mm-hmm.
And then my first time I saw Jason and the Argonauts, I think, was actually on TV. And I was young, and it was like, there it is. And my mom and dad let me stay up, and I'm like, go to home. And then the best part, and in fact, I have turned on countless people who don't know about it these days. Google it, at least watch the skeleton battle.
The skeleton scene, yes.
I'm sure that's influenced me throughout all these books with undead and skeleton, and certainly the Skelelots.
Yeah.
And Kevin Long and I were both like, I mentioned Jason and Argonauts and the skeleton battle, and he's like, "Oh my God, it's like the greatest!" And I'm like, "Yeah,
it's fantastic." I think not yesterday, but the day, like 2 days before we recorded this, I just was like, I haven't seen it in a while, and I pulled up the skeleton fight just to watch it.
It was actually on AMC, like, I want to say like 6 months ago, and I watched the whole movie. And it doesn't hold up all that well, some parts of the movie.
There are some parts, though, that...
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, harpies. I'm sure that's why I love harpies.
Yeah.
And, so anyways, I always loved all this stuff. And one of my regular players at the time, a Canadian named Randy McCall, was a big Cthulhu guy and big horror guy, and was dabbling as a freelance horror writer. He had gotten a thing or two published in some magazines, and he came up to me and said, "Kev, I'd really like to do a horror book." And I'm like, "Me too. In fact, I've got the perfect title, Beyond the Supernatural." Which was, by the way, inspired by a great book on the paranormal called Simply the Supernatural. It's a great book. And so anyways, I said, "Yeah, Randy, go." And we would talk through all the concepts all the time. He was kind of like Eric Wojcik in that way, where he'd call me up and go, "Yeah, Kev, I've got these new ideas, and what do you think of this, that, and other thing?" And I'm like, "Ooh, yeah." And he turned me on to a whole bunch of books on megalithic structures and ley lines. Like I had heard of ley lines, but I didn't really know what they were. And Randy was the one who got me hooked on that whole line of investigation and exploration, and it was very, very interesting. And then lost civilizations and stone megaliths and Stonehenge and the many Stonehenge like places throughout England and France and Scotland and Ireland and all over the place. So I really loved the concepts. I really loved where he was going with it. And then, like a lot of guys, especially a beginning writer, and I really respect that he researched the hell out of it. I mean, he read like 1,000 books. That's not an exaggeration. And then when he turned in his manuscript, it just missed the mark. It fell a little flat. It lacked the wow factor. It was one of these things where I'm like, "Well, where's the stuff on ley lines?" And he's like, "Oh, check out page 149 in the manuscript." And I look at this massive manuscript, and I'll look at it, and it's like half a page. And I'm like, "But no, this has got to be like a fundamental of the magic." And it took like 3 years for him to write it. So all this time, it's percolating in my mind based on our conversations. So the manuscript came in and it was a little flat. And I said, "Randy, I'm going to severely rewrite this and restructure it." And he's like, "That's fine. Do what you got to do." And like I said, he turned me on to a bunch of books and gave me a bunch of other books that he felt were like pivotal that I needed to read. So I read like 350 books myself, including, by the way, Time Magazine did a great, or Time Publishing, I guess, did a great series on the supernatural or the paranormal. That's just amazing. Really well researched. That was one of my resources, along with a gazillion other books. I mean, I've got a whole bunch of them to the left of me, and still on my shelves because they're just good stuff. And then I just kind of ran with it, and armed with Beset's monsters, I'm off to races.
Well, and this is the game where, I mean, as you said, very early on, you had the psionics locked down. You had those mechanics, but this is the game where a lot of what is now considered how Palladium games use magic, like where the mechanics really came out, PPE doubling at the time of death, blood sacrifices, ley lines. I mean, that another stepping stone on the path to Rifts, but also when you revised Palladium, this was pulled back into the Palladium fantasy game.
Absolutely. Well, for me, I just fell in love with all of it. So one of the things I like to create when I'm doing these games is a sense of plausibility.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's all fiction. But I like to create stuff that feels real, feels plausible. And when I took that magic and completely retooled it and developed it the way it is and the way most people know it nowadays, especially Rifts players and Beyond the Supernatural players. One of my guys at the time, Richard Burke, who turned me on to Robotech. Richard Burke was still working for me, and I asked, when I got done with the magic description, that section, I asked him to read it and let me know what he thinks. And he comes up to me like an hour later and he's like, Kev, as far as I'm concerned, not only is this one of the best things you've ever written, this is how magic works in the real world. And I'm like, well, I don't know about that, Rich, but
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then that inspired me for what I wanted to do with Rifts, because I was already kicking around Rifts and I wanted to make it cool and unique. Mm-hmm. and how does it work? What ties it all together? And the idea of the ley lines and where two ley lines cross is a place of magic power. I extrapolated it even farther to make it a place where tears in space and time occur. Mm-hmm. And if you have the right magic abilities and knowledge, you can willingly open these things up and travel to specific places on the planet and into other dimensions. And then in my mind, that like, and if that can happen, if it opens to other dimensions, then that's where demons can come from, and ancient gods and other supernatural beings, and maybe even dragons and elementals. And it just opened up everything and really created the whole concept of the Rifts as an underlining, theme. Because at the time, Rifts is still being developed.
Yeah.
It's all still conceptual for the most part. And, it's one of the things that really helped me launch into what I wanted Rifts to be.
Awesome. Now, you did a follow-up book called Box Nightmares, and I love the cover of Box Nightmares because it's literally a box, right? You've got the front and back cover.
Well, this was cool. I forget whether it was at a science fiction convention or at Gen Con, where we met Dennis Beauvoir in the Artist Alley, and he actually had this painting. And what I really loved was he had like a front and back version of it. And I'm like, oh my God, that's a book cover. I need it. And so that was awesome. And then the book itself is a bunch of adventure modules, I guess, a bunch of different, like 6 different adventures. Fully fleshed out adventures and a bunch of other adventure hooks. There's various creatures and monsters and villains in there. There's a Jack the Ripper type character and some other stuff. Gremlins, of course, because that's Palladium Gremlin.
Yeah.
And
but it also came with we were talking about it. It came with the tabloid, right? After Midnight.
So one of the things that was always fun and crazy, and this is, again, more of a 1960s through the early 2000s phenomenon, where they had these tabloids, outrageous tabloids, like the National Enquirer and I think Weekly World News and other strange stuff. And they would have crazy things like, Elvis's ghost made me pregnant and I bore his love child, and it's like, what? And it's the end of the world next week. Which is bad for the tabloid, but at least next week, if that was true.
Yeah. This week we'll sell a bunch of papers. So,
and so I thought it'd be cool to do a tabloid. We called it After Midnight. Again, with my comic book background, I knew printers who could print the tabloid, and so it was shrink wrapped and included in with the book. And this has a lot of little hooks to the adventures inside, sometimes clues to help solve them, sometimes hooks to get you to go on the adventure. And it coupled with some crazy other articles, and in fact, there's an ad for Ninja Turtles. And there was a bunch of other crazy stuff. I mean, there's one where I can't find it now, but it's like, man pregnant with, and the man is me in the photo. So there's a lot of little inside jokes, monsters found in our cities. And it's one of the promotional stills from the Turtle movie.
Turtles. That's fantastic.
And Doctor invents liquid air. There's a horoscope in it with all kinds of crazy horoscopes. Well, there it is. 140. No, that's not it. This man gave birth to a 7-pound baby. And that's me. We actually had dark hair. So, and it was just inspiring. But one of the really cool things about it, well, for me personally, that was really fun and eye-opening, was we wanted to have a section on UFOs. So there's an article, about UFOs, and followed up with a bunch of other photos. And Kevin Long and I made those photos with some help from Al. And so the UFO, and you can't really see it, you're right. But the UFO is made out of like two microwave bacon grill pans, and like the antenna and some of the other doodads and stuff, I think was from a Gundam model kit. And it's Long just kind of kit bashed it, and I have it someplace still. It's in the warehouse buried in my stuff. But and then it was the classic. We tied it up and hung it from a clear fishing wire on a fishing pole, and we realized that, well, gee, if it's just up against the sky, it doesn't look like much. But if we hold up, I had just trimmed my trees, and I said, hold on, and I went and held up tree branches. So they gave it perspective, and now it seems like it's
flying through over a yard or something like that. Yeah,
right. It was great. It was a lot of fun. We had a blast, but it also kind of shattered me with still photos of UFOs, because if we can make a really convincing UFO so easily,
how much easier is it? Like everyone else who's putting these things together.
Yeah. So. I mean, I tend to believe in UFOs, but
maybe not the pictures that people come up with of them.
Not still photos. Yeah.
So one of the things that I love, I did a review of Beyond the Supernatural second edition, which I don't want to say fixed a problem I had with Beyond the Supernatural, but it really kind of fleshed out one of the details of the world that I didn't feel was mechanically supported, which was, if I've got psychic powers and if there are these monsters here, why don't I just drag one onto television? Or, that what's the old Larry Elmore piece from second edition where you have all the adventurers around the dragon hanging from the tree? Like, why don't I just look, here's a werewolf. We have killed it. And the new mechanics on like psychic resonance in second edition, I feel like really solves that. Do you want to talk about why you created the second edition? Why you added? I mean, that's a massive new rules chunk in the second edition book.
Yeah, well, and it's pivotal, and it's gone into other books since too.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I created Beyond the Supernatural, or co-created, I should say, with Randy McCall, I was running with a lot of Randy's ideas and things, and we were just having fun doing it. And then when it came out, a number of people said, "Yeah, I really love the game, but like you just said, how can it be mystery? How can people not believe this stuff when, I can cast a fireball on a TV show, or I can drag in a demon that I captured, or here's a staked vampire. Look what happens when I pull out the stake. See what happens when I plunge it back in. Gross, but hey, clearly this shit's real." And it just it stuck with me for years.
Right, because the advantage of Call of Cthulhu is it's still the 1920s with all of the limitations and technological realities of that era, but Beyond the Supernatural was our modern day.
Well, and not only with Cthulhu is it set in the past where you could be more secretive and elusive and not be able to prove it, but let's face it, most of the people in Cthulhu who'd be going, the monsters are real, are also in an insane asylum.
That's right. They're all crazy. So everybody.
Like, so it's like.
Sure they are, buddy.
Sure, buddy. Exactly. Yeah, you had to kill those 50 people because they were all monsters. We get it.
That's right, yeah.
Now we're going to put you back in your padded cell. So it again, talk about something that percolated in the back of my head for years and years. Was like, how can I do that? Because everyone who says that is absolutely right. And I finally came up with this great idea of where, and you'll see the same thing, a similar approach, and a lot of people have speculated on this. When you see the magic book that finally comes out in 2025,
Beyond Arcanum,
and Tomes Grotesque, the two are kind of linked because I want to have a bunch of these monsters, supernatural beings that can also tap into magic energy and use magic. So I came up with the idea that psychic abilities and similarly, although to a somewhat lesser degree, magic are designed to fight supernatural threats, to fight the demonic. And so you have a game system where if you're telekinetic, you could spin this on the table or maybe even raise it into the air before it kind of wobbles and drops back down. And people go, yeah, I've seen that trick by, dozens and dozens of street magicians and done much better, by the way.
Yeah.
And that's because your psychic abilities are there, but because they're designed to fight the supernatural, they're at their lowest possible level. Now, if a demon walks into the room, your abilities ramp up. If it's a lesser demon, your abilities go to this level. If it's a greater demon, it goes to that level. If it's an alien intelligence or equivalent of a god or a greater demon, it goes up here. And now you can use these abilities to do a lot of different things. But when the police question you and say, how did you do this? You've got nothing. There's nothing to really prove. Plus, they set it up so that the supernatural, they manifest their form in the our physical realm using different elements, dust or leaves or insects, because they're creepy, right? Mm-hmm. Insects, snakes, amphibians, whatever, to build their bodies. So you might see this lizard-like creature or this werewolf-like creature, but when you kill it, in the case of a werewolf, it would turn back into a man, and now you deal with the consequences of you killed this guy, and you can swear he was a werewolf or a vampire all you want, or something vampiric, and it's like all the police see is a dead body, and you're going to jail for 20 to 50 years.
Yeah.
And hope it's not the gas chamber, right?
Yeah.
And I love that. So yeah, when you kill this supernatural being, it might turn into bubbles or gnats or wasps, or that all disperse in a matter of 30 seconds, and there's no evidence whatsoever that creature ever existed. And same thing with magic. Like if you can cast a fireball, I might weave my spell and throw a fireball at you, and you go, ah! And then you look and and it all bursts into sparks when it hits you. And you're like, you singed my favorite shirt, you SOB. Now, if you were a demon, that fireball is actually going to do a lot more than singe your shirt.
Right.
It's going to be on a similar principle, but I introduced it in this for psychics only. And when I wrote this book, I had the intention of coming out with Beyond Arcanum and Tomes Grotesque within 6 months to a year later. And then just stuff happened.
Yeah.
And because this is one of my absolute favorite in game systems. Or
one of the things I love about it is it gives this sense of like desperate heroism to Beyond the Supernatural. Like, I can't prove that I'm out there saving the world from demons, but you know what? That doesn't matter because I'm the one, or we're the small group of people who can actually combat these things. And if we don't, then the world ends, or it gets taken over,
or at least people suffer.
Yeah.
Innocent people. No, and that's what I kind of love too. I wanted to put a little sort of a spin on the Cthulhu idea, where these people who are fighting demons, these demon slayers, these people with the best of intentions, are not crazy.
Right.
But other people are going to think they are because of what they do and what they've experienced and what they claim is real. The average person is going to go, oh man, that J.M. DeFoggy, he's a lunatic.
I mean, they say that already, so.
Well, they say it about me too, so you're in good company.
Now, one other thing that you did that I loved about Beyond the Supernatural, and we can kind of wrap up here, is you had the Laszlo Society, right? So the Laszlo Society, what is the like the quest giver, the agency, the group that the players can be a part of. And one of the things I loved about Rifts when I first read it was that Victor Laszlo makes it to Rifts. Like, I loved that. But you had a website.
Go ahead. Yeah, right? No, go ahead.
No, sorry. Yeah, you had a website that people could go to join the Laszlo Society.
Yeah, so there's the Laszlo Agency, which actually investigates the supernatural. And then supposedly they have a website called the Laszlo Society, which is ordinary folks like you and I and our viewers who could, hey, something weird happened and I want to report it on my street, you know, and you know, I saw a ghost, or I swear I saw a demon, or, you know, a flying saucer or whatever. Or, hey, I heard about this, or my buddy who works in the police saw this or that. And we just thought it was cool. And we set up a website where we were going to post like real world weird sightings as well as fake stuff. And we did it for a while. I think it's still up there. I don't think anyone's managing it. I think it's still live, but I don't know when the last post ever even was. But it was a cool concept and something we might reinstate when we come out with the 2 books next year.
Awesome.
I also want to mention, just from a game design point of view, is so the conceit we talked about with the demons and how psychic abilities increase proportionally to the supernatural danger. It took me 2 months to hammer out those rules in a way that I felt was clear and concise. And in the book, they're like 2 or 3 pages long.
Yeah.
But it took me 2 months of play testing and thinking and rewriting. And I must have rewritten that damn thing 20 times, you know, and fine tuning it and, you know, handing it to people. Is this better? Is this clearer? Is this, because it was just so important. And I just want to mention that because everyone, I think, thinks, well, game design, you come up with a cool idea, you write it up, boom, it's out there. And it's like, sometimes it takes a really long time for you to get that idea down.
Well, and to like very clearly and succinctly get it across so that someone can read it and use it at their table is very difficult. It is very difficult to refine. I think I remember talking with one of the guys at Pinnacle, and they're like, well, yeah, you know, the chase rules are like 3 pages, you know, in the Savage Worlds book, but it took us, you know, a year to just hammer and refine and get them to where they ran smoothly, but they were clear to understand.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was all. I just wanted to point that out.
Oh yeah, no, it's my favorite thing about the revision to 2nd edition. Like I think we've talked about it. I was like, this really makes the game sing.
Yeah, for me, it's that and ordinary people. that you can play ordinary people, which I continued that into Dead Rain, our zombie apocalypse game. And you'll be seeing more of it in other books, where here's a real basic, fundamental, ordinary person, and then, gosh, they have this spectacular ability or that ability. So, when I run games, adventures at conventions or the Palladium Open House, most of the characters are ordinary people who realize, oh, I have this psychic ability as well, or I had this horrible experience with a creature, and I don't want anyone else to have to suffer through that. And but what are they in the real world? They're a plumber, or a landscaper, or a college student, taxi driver. That's who they are. But they've been dragged into this realm of the supernatural, where now they're kind of something more.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for hanging out and talking about this. I'm really excited because we are now far enough in the timeline that we're going to start our I can only assume it's going to be a multi-episode interview on riffs. So I'm looking forward to that next time.
Me too.